With the release of Grand Archive's 7th set, Distorted Reflections, 2 new starter decks are hitting store shelves. And beyond simply marking another great time to try the game out, these 2 new starters, Ciel Mirage's Grave and Diana Moonpiercer, are bringing totally new gameplay loops and unique themes to your gaming table. To help you not get overwhelmed by Distorted Reflections' whimsical wonderland of new mechanics, I'm Dan with Maindeck, and in this video we're going to deep dive into the Ciel Mirage's Grave starter deck. We'll go through what comes inside the box, how the deck works, and we'll look at every card to provide you strategic advice and even some upgrades to consider so you can take this deck even further. So if you're ready to serve from the shadows, stick around for this deep dive of the Ciel Mirage's Grave starter deck. The Ciel starter deck contains all the basic items you need to play the game. A 60 card main deck, a 12 card material deck, as well as the Servile Possessions Mastery card, which we'll talk about more in a moment. In addition, if you're new to the game, a link to some basic resources to start playing is included. If you're very lucky, your Ciel Mirage's Grave level 3 may be replaced by a textured foil signature Ciel Mirage's Grave, so make sure to sleeve it up if you find it. When it comes to playstyle, the Ciel Mirage's Grave starter deck is a fire element deck with a focus on a new mechanic, building up omens. Ciel's level 1 and the Servile Possessions Mastery card it creates tell you all the basics. At the end of each of your turns as Ciel, you can banish 1 card from your hand or graveyard with an omen counter on it. That card is now an omen, and as you build up more omens, the Servile Possessions Mastery will increase the power of all of Ciel's attacks. You'll want to pay special attention to the reserve cost of the cards you banish as omens, as well as which cards you banish, as there will be a number of cards in the deck that will increase in power with different costs or types of cards banished, or even allow you to swap or play cards from your omens. The playstyle this creates is one that benefits going late into the game. While there are ways to spike damage in the early and mid game, Ciel's power builds over time with more omens, and his most impressive and hardest to stop wins will come from interactions on his level 3 with a lot of omens banished. The strongest way to play this deck is thus often to play defensively, relying on your intercept and taunt allies to stand in the way while you portend your opponent's demise. With the basic description covered, before we really dig into the deck, I have to let you know that if you are also interested in the Diana Moonpiercer starter deck, that is being covered on our friend Ava Plays Stuff's channel. She'll have an absolutely fantastic video that you can click on, linked in the description or at the end of this video if you want to check that out. Now, without any further ado, let's dig into the cards in the Ciel Mirage's Grave starter deck. The full deck list is displayed here on the screen, and as I said before, you'll get a full 60 card deck and 12 card material deck built for you, as well as that Servile Possessions Mastery card. And here I've highlighted everything that is exclusive to this deck and not found in any other product. Now let's dive into each card individually, starting with the material deck. Your game starts with the basic Spirit of Fire, allowing you to draw 7 cards and enabling the fire element. Ciel Loyal Valet is the deck's level 1 champion, and as a guardian, he has a hefty life pool of 20. Like we showed before, he has 2 effects. First, on enter, you gain the Servile Possessions Mastery. This mastery will increase the damage of Ciel's attacks as your omen count increases, and when you have 5 or more omens, you also get to draw a card into your memory when Ciel attacks. An omen is simply any card that is banished with an omen counter on it, and the most common way to turn a card into an omen is through his inherited effect, which allows you to banish a card with an omen counter on it from either your hand or graveyard every turn. Because it's an inherited effect, you'll get to keep doing this every turn even after you level up, and you'll want to do it every turn if possible to unlock Ciel's full power. Omens don't inherently do anything, but in addition to increasing your attack power from the Servile Possessions Mastery, you'll see more interactions with them as we move through the rest of the deck. Our level 2 is Ciel Omenbringer, with another big life pool of 25, and who once again has 2 abilities. First, let's talk about this on enter. This is worded in a really interesting way, so make sure you resolve this correctly. When you level up into Ciel Omenbringer, for each omen you have, you get to discard a card from your hand or memory, and then draw a card into your memory. The way this is worded allows you to complete these discard and draws one at a time, so after you discard, always draw into memory before you pick the next card to discard. This can be clutch for finding that floating memory on top of your deck, and obviously the more omens you have when you go to level 2, the more potential value you can gain by finding floating memory cards or setting up cards to turn into omens. Ciel Omenbringer also has a lineage release ability, which means you can banish him from your lineage after you have reached level 3 in order to use it. But this is a super powerful ability. You cannot activate it until you have 6 or more omens, but it allows you to activate any card from your omens. Remember that all activated abilities are fast speed unless otherwise stated, which means that this ability allows you to even play a slow speed card or ally at fast speed. But keep in mind that attacks cannot be started outside of a slow action on your main phase, so there's no using this to attack the opponent during their turn. But once Ciel has brought enough omens, one of them will come to pass, and access to reusing a powerful attack during your main phase or activating from a toolbox of clutch effects at fast speed portends his certain victory. And to make that victory totally inevitable, Ciel Mirage's Grave is here to lock down the game with one very powerful effect. In addition to enabling all of your Umbra advanced element cards, which you cannot play until you've reached this level, whenever you place an omen counter on a card, which will happen each time you banish a new omen, Ciel's ability triggers to deal an unpreventable 2 damage to any unit, which most often will target your opponent's champion. Now the opponent can't escape, and with the full-size 30 life available, Ciel only needs to cling onto life in order for his shadows to eventually choke the opponent out and send them to the grave. While this may look like a simple 2 damage per turn, we'll showcase several effects that can allow you to banish multiple omens in a single turn. As for the rest of the material deck, we have a mix of some classic regalia and some new tricks for Ciel. Bauble of Abundance is back with new art, and just like other starter decks, gives you access to a free card draw if you're okay with your opponent getting one as well. Bulwark Sword has seen a good amount of competitive play, and it's still great here, especially with the Servile Possessions Mastery pumping up its consistent damage. The cost of 2 reserve each time you attack with it is a small price to pay when the Sword and Mastery combine for 4, 5, or even 6 damage on their own. But for a sharp new option, the Grande Aiguille provides a simple 1 power, 2 durability weapon for 0 that can move up to 2 power if you can set up 2 allies in your omens. Considering the mastery, this will be at minimum 3 power with your omen setup, but up to 5 as the game gets later, and for 0 reserve cost to attack. Leporine Mask is sure to get experienced players excited. Much like other popular material deck cards, the mask can give you a guaranteed draw into memory if you're willing to pay the reserve cost. While it starts at 6, it decreases for each omen you have, possibly down to 0. The trick with these cards is always to plan in advance to have the cards in hand when your turn starts. That way you can materialize the mask, then activate it in your recollection phase, allowing you to then immediately get back both the cost you paid and the new card you just drew into memory when you recollect. For another draw option, we have the return of Life Essence Amulet, which tends to be pretty consistent in this deck with all of our taunt and intercept options. This lets you draw a card when an ally you control dies during the opponent's turn, making those defensive plays more punishing if the opponent is trying to shut you down before your omens grow. Terrafring provides another well-loved defensive option. You can banish it during the opponent's recollection phase to buy yourself a little breathing room by forcing them to pay 2 reserve for each attack they want to make that turn. Do not underestimate this as a way to stall for a turn to build up that one more omen you need to go off. Manxome Armoire is one of the most interesting cards in the material deck. It has a simple effect that is deceptively powerful. You get to return an omen to hand, then banish a card from your hand as an omen. Of course, when used at level 3, this will trigger Ciel to deal 2 damage, but also when combined with the level 2 lineage release, you now have several ways to reuse clutch effects that you've banished as omens. Use this to grab that interceptor that gave its life to protect you already once this game, or take back a heavy swing to heavy swing again, even harder. And finally, we have one Umbra element regalia, and remember, you cannot materialize this until you have reached level 3 and enabled the Umbra element. The Grande Sonnerie is Ciel's strongest sword, which has a fairly easy condition to meet by the time you're level 3. You just need the total reserve of your omens to add up to 10 or more. If you do, you're traded to a devastating 4 power, 3 durability weapon that reaches even greater heights with the Servile Possessions Mastery. It's not hard to see where your game-ending damage can come from once you reach level 3 with weapons like this. Now, let's move on to the main deck, where we'll be treated to some of Ciel's wonderfully powerful allies, actions, and attacks. Starting with the Koi Bouclier, we have the first of many defensive allies in the deck. For a heavy reserve cost of 5, you'll get a 2 power, 4 life ally at base. However, this level 2+ bonus means that once you are at level 2 or higher, the cost reduces to 3. And this class bonus means that once you have leveled into at least Ciel's level 1, the Bouclier gains the ability to gain Taunt as long as you control any other ally. Taunt is a powerful keyword that means that as long as this ally is awake, the opponent cannot target other units with attacks, including your champion. The Sablier Guard will be one of the more surprising allies in the deck. While it starts as just a 3 reserve cost 1/1, it gets an additional power and life from every omen you have. By the mid-game, this ally is already more powerful than most allies in the game, and it becomes a devastating threat on its own in the late game when you have 5 or 6 omens. Stalwart Shieldmate returns and has an unconditional taunt as well as floating memory. If you're newer to the game, floating memory is a powerful keyword that allows you to banish this card from your graveyard to pay for a memory cost of a card you're materializing. Remember that this is used during your materialize phase to pay for costs like your champion levels, and each floating memory card banish reduces the number of cards you need to banish from memory by 1. Vigil Rampart is a simple ally with 4 reserve costs that has 1 power and 4 life base, but moves up to a potent 3/4 as soon as you become a guardian. And Whimsy's Warden is another cheap defensive unit, this time with Intercept. Intercept allows you to redirect attacks that target your champion to the Awake Interceptor, but remember that unlike Taunt, this one can't protect your allies. While it's just a 1/2 normally, once you have 2 or more omens, it becomes a much more threatening 3 power unit, useful for punishing attacks with a retaliation when it intercepts. The Conflagrant Sentinel is our first fire ally, and for a 3 cost, you get a 2/2 ally that can become a 3/3 by discarding a card on enter. While going down a card is rough, this is one of just a handful of ways to get a card into your graveyard early on to banish for an omen. And if you were just gonna banish a card from your hand otherwise, you might as well use it to get a buff counter. Torch Marshal is also at 3 cost, but comes with a sturdier 3/3 body naturally, and 4/3 when you meet the class bonus. However, much like the Bulwark Sword, you'll need to pay 2 reserve to attack with it, so that power comes with a cost. Moving on to the attack cards, the Guardian Classic Heavy Swing returns, and it's here once again to allow you to perform gigantic 6 damage attacks, but this time, that's before we take into account the Servile Possessions Mastery, or any weapon you might add to it. The cost is equally heavy at 6, but the class bonus reduces it down to 4 once you are off of your spirit. Lamentation's Toll is the other non-advanced element attack card in the deck, which is a somewhat weak 3 power attack for 4 before you reach level 2, but at level 2 or above, it can be remarkably strong. It gets additional power equal to the highest power stat in your omens, which is looking for both ally cards or attack cards like Heavy Swing that can boost it up to a massive 9 power. Now, moving on to actions, one of the most talked about cards from the deck might be Flamme Sorcelle. For just a 2 reserve cost and at fast speed, Flamme Sorcelle lets you draw and discard from your hand, and then if the card you discarded matches the reserve cost of one of your omens, you'll draw another card. While it requires a little setup and is not efficient on your first turn, it does act a lot like a 2-cost Creative Shock when you can set it up well, making it one of the best cards in your deck for generating value from your floating memory cards. Speaking of which, 2 actions return that are perfect to discard with Flamme Sorcelle: Tempered Steel and Idle Thoughts. While Idle Thoughts is a reasonable turn 1 play on your early games with the deck, and Tempered Steel can have a niche use to rebuild durability on one of your solid weapons, both are fantastic cards to discard to Flom to simply accrue value as you level. Martial Guard is another floating memory action card in the deck, but this one is a little more useful at key points in the game. It can keep you alive or protect your powerful or defensive allies. But don't be afraid to discard this, especially with your level 2 on enter, to get value instead if needed. Just make sure you notice that the floating memory here is only active when you are Ciel level 2 or above. And before we move on to the advanced element cards, Overpowering Defense rounds out our action suite as a somewhat niche reaction card. It can negate any card activations you don't control, but only while you're attacking with a Guardian. The obvious thing this can stop would be combat enders like a Song of Frost, but aside from that, this can seem pretty low impact. However, if you stick around for the end of our strategy tips, we have a clutch play you'll want to keep in mind with this card that your opponent might not believe when you do it. Last, we'll look at the advanced element cards that will power your way to victory in the late game once you've reached level 3. Umbra Chevalier is an exciting ally that lets you perform an armoire effect on enter, returning an omen to hand and banishing a new one from hand. This will trigger your Ciel level 3 damage and help you omen the right cards to set up for your other effects, and comes stacked on a solid 3/3 body. Sinister Stab rounds out our attacks with a pretty cool effect. As a curse, it has the ability to stack into a player's lineage, and in this case, if you have 5 or more omens on it, it will enter your opponent's lineage and curse them with -3 life in addition to its dealt damage. This represents an effective 10 damage attack with 5 omens in play thanks to Servile Possessions, and all for a lower reserve cost than any of your other attacks. Umbra Sight is our other curse card, and this one actually will curse Ciel instead. This 0-cost fast speed spell lets you draw a card and then draw a second card into memory if you let it curse you. When it does, it will go underneath your other champion cards and then deal you 2 damage for every curse there. Free cards come at a cost. But thankfully, Reverse Affliction gives you a way to manage your curses. This fast speed action lets you banish a curse from your lineage, and if you own it, such as your Umbra Sight, you also get to make it an omen. This can be huge for suddenly ramping your omens as well as dealing additional damage from Ciel's level 3 trigger. And once Umbra Sight is placed in your curses, your Armoire or Chevalier could grab it back if you want it to draw a couple more cards. Ciel is blessed with one of the stronger single target removal spells we've seen in Nocturne's Oblivion. Even at a 3 cost, a fast speed destroy anything spell is useful, but with 5 or more omens it goes down to a simple cost of 1 to activate. However, before you get too excited, it does banish itself on use without an omen counter, so there's no shenanigans to make it an omen and then get it back after you use it. Finally, our SR Umbra card is a wild spell called Devotion's Price. If you're willing to pay the cost to reserve and then discarding 2 cards, you get to draw a card for each omen you have with a different reserve cost. This can often draw 4 or 5 cards, making it a spectacular way to suddenly build a big hand after reaching level 3. And by banishing it as an omen after using it, you could set up to do it again if you want. Just be careful to not get it negated, or you may find that that price was far too steep. Now let's talk about a few strategy tips to help you have better first games with the deck. Even for experienced players, it can take a few games to get used to the flow of the Ciel deck. There's a lot to pay attention to. Banishing the right omens, leveling efficiently, and then making use of the allies and attacks you draw can have your brain pulling you in all sorts of different directions. So let's go over some tips and tricks that we learned from our first games to help you play your first games better. First, omens are really the name of the game. You'll want to level to 1 right away so you can start banishing them. Not doing so will often leave you a turn behind closing the game later on. But once you are at level 1, the question really becomes how to play your cards so you can banish from graveyard every turn. The math is clear, banishing an omen from your graveyard doesn't put you down a card, but doing it from your hand does. So when in doubt, make your plays to try to have something to banish from your graveyard at the end of the turn. But if all else fails, it's usually better to banish an omen from hand than to not banish an omen at all. But to avoid that, remember that cards like Conflagrant Sentinel and Lamentation's Toll might not feel the best to play early, but they can guarantee you get a card in your graveyard to banish, and that is sometimes very worthwhile. You'll want to pay close attention to what cards you banish as well. Cards like Devotion's Price want different reserve costs in your omens, and you'll often want to have a variety of them banished for Flamme Sorcelle as well. In fact, if you see a Flamme Sorcelle early, make sure to think hard about which cards you want to banish to set up playing it. The ideal play is to discard a floating memory to Flamme Sorcelle and then draw a card off of it. So finding a way to banish a 1 reserve cost card like Reverse Affliction can help you set up to be able to discard your Idle Thoughts or Tempered Steel for maximum card value. Now your deck is full of pretty powerful allies and attacks, and in fact some of these feel like some of the best allies printed in the game. But remember, you are not a warrior, and you need time to build up to your power. So instead of playing aggressive allies and attacking turn after turn, most of the time you'll want to prioritize playing defensively, especially if you're against a powerful attacking deck like the new Diana. It is often right to simply play a taunt or intercept ally and pass, biding your time and forcing the opponent to play through your defenses while you level to 3. When you lose the game to Diana, it will often be because you underestimated her damage or didn't put up a taunt ally and hold back 3 cards to make sure her attack could be blocked. When Diana loses to you though, it will usually be because she couldn't get enough attacks through and you won through pure attrition. Just because she's water and you're fire doesn't mean that she's control and you're aggro. These decks are kind of the opposite. Once you reach level 3, your plays really unlock. In addition to managing your toolbox of omens to get back key cards with your Lineage Release and Umbra Chevalier, here are a couple of high-level tricks that will give you the edge to win against tougher opponents. Umbra Sight may seem like a simple card, but it's got an advanced timing concept that only a few cards have cooked into it, called a reflexive trigger. Marked by this phrase, "when you do," this indicates that part of this card's effect happens as a triggered ability after the rest of the card has resolved. And anytime we have triggered abilities, of course, both players have opportunity to respond to them before we resolve them. What that means for you is that you can do this. Once you draw a card into memory and put the Umbra Sight into your lineage, this "when you do" trigger will go on the stack, waiting to resolve. Before you let it resolve, you can activate Reverse Affliction to send this curse straight into your omens. Then you resolve the "when you do" reflexive trigger and deal your champion 2 damage for every curse in your lineage. But there are none anymore, so you'll take 0 damage. And if that didn't break your brain enough, our last trick is super useful against elements like Water and Astra, which often defend themselves by negating cards. This is the trick we mentioned earlier with overpowering defense. Now remember how I mentioned Ciel's level 2 can let you play slow speed cards at fast speed? If you have any cards that you need to activate to win the game in your omens, such as a Sablier Guard to get the damage you need to win, you simply attack using a weapon with Ciel. Before the attack deals its damage though, you Lineage Release your Ciel level 2 and activate your Sablier Guard from your omens. Now if the opponent wants to try to negate the guard, you can use Overpowering Defense to negate their negate, because you're doing all of this during your attack. This is the kind of tricky play that you'll need sometimes to close the game against Diana, so make sure you keep your defenses up, play for the long game, and keep these plays in mind. Now that you have some idea of the strategies to focus on, let's talk about where to take the deck from here. This is a starter deck, so of course there is room for upgrade built in. One of the best things you can do is to find more ways to discard cards early to turn into omens. To that end, you'll find some cards in both Dawn of Ashes and Mortal Ambition, like Hasty Messenger and Creative Shock, that are perfect for providing you ample opportunities to discard cards earlier in the game and get your omens ready to rock. Even Cremation Ritual makes a fantastic addition as a way to simply move allies into the graveyard while keeping your card count up. Savage Smash is always a solid card to consider in Guardian as another floating memory card that you can use as an attack sometimes. When you upgrade the deck, you'll want to make sure you don't end up with too few cards at certain reserve costs, so this being a 4 cost might be a relevant consideration when changing cards around. Ava probably doesn't want me to tell you this, but Smashing Force is another cool attack that actually can destroy her favorite Aetherwing, Aqua Mirage Whisper, because it's not a spell. You may need to build with more fire cards in mind as well, but this will surely turn the tide against Diana if you can't quite beat her otherwise. And if you're lucky enough to own any, the ultra rare Carter Synthetic Reaper from Alchemical Revolution actually is Guardian class bonused as well, so he's a super powerful ally to have against ally focused decks that can shore up your life and buy you all the time you need to cinch the win. He even lets you sacrifice an ally, which could be useful for setting up another Omen. Finally, we expect Distorted Reflections to have a lot of useful new cards for Ciel, and if you stay tuned to our next Grand Archive video, I'll have several more spoiler cards from Distorted Reflections, including a powerful ultra rare that you might consider hunting down and playing if you are a big Ciel fan. You will not want to miss these ones. Regardless of how you tweak the deck, I'm sure you will love playing with the new Ciel Mirage's Grave starter deck. Now, if you're itching for more Grand Archive decks, I've got a couple of great options here for you. One is from our friend Ava Plays Stuff covering the Diana Moonpiercer deck, and the other is another deck that we've covered in the past. Hope you enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you all in the next one.